Welcome to Tree Doctors, everybody. I'm your host, John Passmore, and I'm fixing to catch up with Ed Dickey. We're going to look at some interesting trees like this one right here. It's all coming up on Tree Doctors.
You know, great strides have been made in the chemical community as the technology come available now where you don't need to clumber some capsules to tree, and we can put actually 9 or 10 different products at one time in a tree. You can see it boiling out from around the base of that as I'm injecting this into the soil ball. Amino acids, different miticides, insecticides. We can choose what we want to treat for, and we get a long residual from this. So you get a year's worth of good or longer out of our injection when we do a tree. An actual molt of chemicals put around your tree, and it's all moisture activated. So as the weather hits it or the rain, it supercharges it again and carries through the tree. So to get rid of your unwanted insects or to revive a tree to put new life in it, you know, that's what we do. We put the zap back in the sap. We give new life to old trees. That's what we do. We're the Tree Doctors. Dickey Tree Service in your yellow pages under trees.
Let's go back into the field and catch up with Ed Dickey, the head tree doctor at Dickey Tree Service, right now on Tree Doctors.
I have a lot of people call the office and ask about building a wall or putting a confinement around the base of their tree. Here they've got one made out of just pieces of Arkansas stone that they concreted together and raised it up there about 8 inches. It's been there a good while. This is a yellow mulberry that's it's around, and they put mulch in it and got flowers, and this doesn't hurt the tree because what you do is the roots can still breathe through this mulch, and it holds the moisture in there. And if they did a gradual rise, I talked to the people about it, and they did a gradual rise when they was filling this with the soil. It took a couple of years, and they gradually brought it up and raised the sides this much. So this has been around this tree for about 20 years. So if you think ahead, you can put stuff around your tree like this. And they did a pretty good circle, if you ask me, just out of the blue, without any help. So you can do that as long as you can maintain looking at the trunk of your tree to see if you got a problem. You know, if you got a bunch of vines on it, needless to say, it's pretty difficult to see if you got boring insects working on your tree. But put a wall around them, a little mulch, don't hurt a thing. I'm here in Rector, Arkansas with Leland Blackshear. And Leland, me and you go back a ways, don't we?
Ever since you've been in business, Ed.
Yes, sir. And
I believe about 1968.
Yeah, pretty close. And I've took care of Leland's trees for years, but Leland has a lot to do with the park here in Rector. And a few years ago, you had my crews come in. We treated all these big old trees, didn't we, Leland?
Yes, you did, Ed. And my Lord, they was in big trouble with borers. And you came in, I remember you helped us out a lot, and it saved a lot of big trees out here. And then, of course, this year, earlier, you came in and treated, I believe, 27 smaller trees and one big sycamore that we've been trying to save. But these trees are old out here, and they've had a lot of abuse and wind and disease, and we're presently in a reforestation, which you know.
Right.
And we have to do that in order to perpetuate this park where we have the Labor Day picnic every year, since 1941.
That's right. There's big crowds every Labor Day when they have this picnic, too. But what I like about what Leland and the park people are doing is they're putting out trees to take the place of some of these larger ones that's been damaged over the years from lightning, and like the one right behind Leland and I here, that was put out with a tree spade here a few years ago, and they water it and take care of it. But have you ever dated back? You told me what's the oldest tree out here, Leland, roughly?
Oh, I would say a good 200 years old. It's the largest tree in the park back behind the community center.
Right, we're going to walk and look at that here in a little bit, but what's so neat is Leland's house is right straight across the street from this park, so he's had a bird's eye view all your life, hasn't
Oh, I grew up out here. It's my front yard and playground, and as well as a lot of other kiddos back then. But this park is very important to the city of Rector, and Parks and Recreation Commission are responsible for its upkeep, which you know, and we've had a lot of help from the city. What we could use, of course, is an ongoing reforestation, which we will do.
Right.
And you will, I hope, take care of our trees.
There you go. I will.
Yes, sir.
I do, and I try to do my part to help the parks and rec and a lot of these towns.
Oh, you've been good to us. You have.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, y'all, I like it when people take care of their trees and got parks for people to enjoy. And Leland and I are going to walk over to one of these another big trees and talk a little bit about that. Leland, what do you know about this big old tree here?
All I know is it's big and it's old and it's had to survive pretty much on its own until about 5 years ago when you treated it for borers, and it just shines like new money now.
Yeah, a lot of these trees done real well after that, and I think I mentioned before that Leland grew up right across the street near this park, and you don't take care of all these trees by yourself, do you, Leland?
Oh, Lord, no. I'm on the Parks Commission, but so is Don Pickler and Charles Manchester, and the three of us pretty much take care of the park out here, or make sure it's taken care of. And we have the Ladies Garden Club, and
that's very important.
oh my goodness, all these pretty flowers you see in the triangular beds and the round beds to the entrance and exits of the park, they do a wonderful job with that, as well as downtown. But Patsy Harden and Reba Scobie, Linda Robertson, and others, many others, they do a wonderful job down here.
They sure do. And as we was walking over here, you mentioned to me that a time before you'd been on TV. What was you on TV for then, Leland?
I was the Golden Ruler Award in '94. I used to teach school.
Yes, sir. Very good teacher, too. I've heard a lot of comments about it.
Look out.
And you got an award there for that, didn't you?
Yeah, Golden Ruler Award. But all teachers are good teachers.
Oh, you betcha. Yeah, very important.
Let me rephrase that. All teachers who want to be are good teachers.
Well said, Leland. Back to these trees here. Leland's, I've been taking care of the trees at your house longer than this park, of course, needless to say, hadn't I?
Oh, goodness, yes. And thank goodness you have. Because I was in trouble, and you bailed me out years ago. I must say 25 years ago at least, maybe 30.
Right, it was a long time ago, and he's got a couple of big old, just like these trees here, around his home over, and I know that makes that home comfortable to live in too, doesn't it?
Well, it makes it a lot cooler, and besides, I don't want to lose a tree. I love trees.
Right, well, we're going to move around here in the park and show some other places here in a minute, Leland, and talk a little bit more about these trees.
Ed, we'll do that, but I want to ask you, how old do you think this big oak is? I don't really know for sure.
Well, if you'll remember a few years ago when they did the bicentennial type trees, I remember there was a red oak that was similar to this size that got the bicentennial plaque. So I would put that somewhere between the 150 and 200-year-old mark. There's a lot of places across northeast Arkansas and southeast Missouri that have a bad mosquito problem. We haven't talked much about purple martins, but houses, and that's what they've done here with looks like an old antenna tower, and put a purple martin house on it, and they have a few more in the yard, and it actually takes care, according to the people here, a big portion of any unwanted mosquitoes, so they can enjoy their lawn and yard and trees later in the day than most people. So they're really worth having. They're a very cost-effective way of getting rid of some mosquitoes, and we forget that sometimes. And all they require is a house, and put it up where they'll live in it, take care of it a little bit, get rid of the mosquitoes, and enjoy your yard and your trees. I'm here in Rector, Arkansas, and I'm with
Laura Tamarian.
I had Laura say that because I was scared I'd mess that name up. And she called me in, and why don't you tell me what was going on with your trees?
Well, we noticed the leaves were all had been gone, and I found worms here in my bird bath, and I needed some help, so I called the tree doctor.
Yes, ma'am. When I got here, half of this tree had been defoliated. The caterpillars had just virtually eat everything off halfway up, haven't they?
Yes, they have. They really have.
And that was this morning when I treated this tree, and I come back with the cameraman to talk to her. And have you noticed any dead worms or anything?
Well, yes, I've noticed several around here.
Yes,
you know. Yeah.
So it's working good, isn't it?
It sure is. It sure is.
And she washed out her bird bath to take care of the birds. And she's got a pretty old piece of property here, some history about these trees, and we're going to move to the backyard and talk about a pecan tree, if that's all right with you.
That will be fine.
We're here in Laura's backyard, like I said we would, and this is a pecan tree. And won't you tell our viewers what's in this tree, Laura?
Well, there's an old pipe that my dad put in there about in the 1940s, and this was gravel out here, and he had his shop in the backyard, and so we couldn't really water it too well. So he put this pipe that he had made down into the ground, and we have watered this tree while it was young, and since then it has grown.
Oh yeah, it's grew over the pipe, and it'll do too much damage to even think about taking it out. I think it's just a curiosity, and it's made out of part of an old automobile radiator or something back then, wasn't it?
Yes. This was back in the 1940s when this was done. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And so these trees are at least 55 years old, don't you?
I would think so, yes.
Yes, ma'am. And y'all lived here for how long?
Oh, let's see. We have lived here practically all my life. My mother lived here. She was born here. And then they married, and then they built a house. Tore the old house down and built a new house back in the 30s. And this is the same house that we have. And so we've lived here for years.
So this is indeed y'all's family trees, aren't they, around here?
I was a King. My mother and dad's name were Morgan and Vernelia King. And they were reared in this community, too.
I'll be doggone. That's interesting. So I like talking about family trees and people taking care of them. And she had me treat all these trees, by the way, while I was here this morning. And one of these days we'll liable to check back and we'll just see how good my stuff's done and talk to you again.
Thank you. It's nice talking to you.
Thank you. If you watch the show much at all, you've seen me where we fill these cavities in different trees. And in this case right here, this is a small hole. And I caution people about being quick to throw concrete or filler in these holes, because that very well could be a drain port for a hole up above there. And if that's the case, then you're actually stopping an exit point for water when it rains. If you trap water in it, it sours, it rots, and you do more damage than good. So before you fill that hole, kind of do a little checking out to see if that hole doesn't go to another spot. Like right here, right above me, is another hole, and that's where the water is going in and coming out down here. And the way to correctly do that would be fill that top hole, check it after a rain, make sure you don't have any leakage from this bottom, and then fill that bottom. And then you'd be doing it right. Look around before you fill those holes. I'm here in Rector with George Jernigan and his mother, Mrs. Jernigan, and just got through about a week ago treating all these trees in the yard. And George, won't you kind of tell me, our viewers, what was going on with your trees when you called?
We were totally infested with all kinds of worms. I can't even begin to tell you how many there were. You know that, but there were tree borers, there were tent worms, there were army worms, there were little bitty green crawly things.
Yes, sir.
All kinds of stuff.
What I liked about it, you actually heard them eating, didn't you?
Yes, it sounded like rain falling between their chomping on the leaves and the excrement they dropped. It was like a patter of rain on the ground.
Right. If anybody's ever familiar with army worms, they know how they can invade. It's kind of like the gypsy moth, invade an area. Mrs. Jernigan, how long have you lived here?
Since February of 1978.
78. And I was talking a little bit with you last week, and you had a hand in planting of some of these pines and stuff, didn't you?
Well, I was offered some trees from the state. I don't remember exactly how I got them, but anyway, I got a pretty good bundle of them, of pines, and I proceeded to plant them everywhere. Some places I wish I hadn't, but they're there and they've grown nicely, and I hesitate to do much cutting.
Yes, ma'am. And a lot of these trees are native to this area. They were here when y'all built a house, wasn't they?
Oh, yes, this was my father's property, and he used it as a pasture for cattle. We were in the Ford business, and when in those days we accepted almost anything for a down payment on cars, and we many times had cows and horses, mules. I don't think I ever got a goat, but I had a goat up here one time. Anyway, we had this, and that's always my home for my husband was right over there on the corner. And
that'd be where the mayor lives now. Is that correct?
The mayor lives now, and we just always sort of planned on, or at least I did, that using this hilltop for a house. So that's where we built.
Yes, ma'am. And what did your husband do?
When we started building the house?
No, his occupation. I mean, he was a doctor, wasn't he?
He's a doctor.
Yes, ma'am. A medical doctor?
Medical doctor.
And in Georgia, I'll get back to you here now. You retired from the Air Force at Blyville, didn't you?
Yes, I did, back in '88.
Right, and
Had 2 tours there.
2 tours in Blyville.
Spent quite a bit of time down there.
Right. My crews, when I had trimming crews, we used to trim off the base back during that time.
I remember that. Yeah. And I also remember your television commercials on Channel 8 way back then.
Yes, sir. We've been there for a while. And so you're just enjoying your retirement now, aren't you?
Well,
His second retirement.
I guess you could say that, but she keeps us really busy. There's a lot to take care of here.
Oh, it is. It's a big yard. We're going to move around and talk about some of the trees too. There's a few here. Mrs. Jernigan had some weak spots, and we had to bolt them back together because she wanted to save our trees. And I asked George, did he know how many trees was in the yard? And he wasn't aware of how many, but there's in excess of 200 for sure. Don't you agree, Miss Jernigan?
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. Do you have any? I don't know if you noticed it, but behind my cameraman, and we'll show it here in a minute, that this big yellow mulberry, there's a rock growed into a limb up there about 8 foot tall. Any story to that, George, you remember as a kid?
I think there may have been. We used to climb this tree when we were kids. We'd come back from our cousins, and my brother and I would come back here from wherever our fathers were stationed in the military. And we used to hang out up here in this hill, but somebody had to have put that rock up there, and it could have been one of us boys.
Right, just grew over it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
It's been there a while.
Yes, it has. So that's the theme of our TV show, Family Trees, and these are definitely all y'all's family trees, and they go back to the turn of the century, don't they, Miss Jernigan?
About.
Yes, ma'am. Well, close to 100 years, almost, isn't it? And I didn't get a chance to mention your age, and I hate to ask the lady their age, but you don't have to tell me, but how old are you, Miss Jernigan?
91.
How old?
91.
90. I want to make sure our viewers heard that, because Miss Jernigan walked all over this yard with me, and she can travel pretty well. She sure can. Well, we're going to move around, if you don't mind, to another spot, and we'll talk about some other unusual trees she has. Last week while I was here treating the Jernigan's trees, I pointed out to George and his mother this tree that has a weak place here, and it really should have a rod in it. One reason is spending money to take care of it, and storm come in and bust it, and they agreed with me, and Miss Jernigan actually watched me put the rod in, didn't you, Miss Jernigan?
Surely did. I'd never seen it done before, and it was interesting.
A little harder than it looks, isn't it?
A little bit harder.
Yes, ma'am, but we go that extra mile. We drill all the way through it, and we put a 1-inch rod in there, and this should help this great tree be here a long time. And did you set this tree out, Miss Jernigan?
No, I don't think so. I don't recall setting out any
Of the hardwoods?
hardwood trees.
But she did set out all these pines, and there's a abundance of those around here. But this is a pretty old tree right here. And
I think it was here before I had the house built.
yes, ma'am.
Absolutely, Mother. How old would you say this is?
I would probably be pushing 45 to 55, I would think. From you got to remember where you're at here, kind of on the ridge. Everything grows good. Your apples, your garden, everything. So if this was down in the lowlands, it'd grow a little faster because it catch all the nutrients, but it's deprived of that on the top of it. It grows well otherwise, but it don't grow big volume-wise. So it's a probably 45, 55-year-old tree. Mrs. Jernigan, we moved around here in your yard, and I noticed you got a abundance of fig trees back here. When did you start with the figs?
Several years ago, I got a start from a neighbor just down the street way, and I got one tree started, and I found out how good they were, and I've rooted several limbs. I've given them to friends. I have trees in Memphis that a friend carried sprout with him, and he has given them to his neighbors. So I've spread my fig trees around.
Got some in Nashville too.
Some in Nashville. They're pretty well scattered.
Yes, ma'am. Well, you sure got a bunch of them here, and you make, I guess, fig jam and stuff with them?
I have made fig preserves, but I just like them just plain figs.
Plain figs. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I like them too. But they sure do.
Just be careful about eating too many.
Oh, yeah. That could be a problem too with anything, I think, eating too many. Well, you sure done a good job with that, and it's a beautiful home that you've got the figs right here along the side of.
Thank you.
And so George, how many pound or bushel you get off of there, do you know?
So far, we've gotten close to a bushel, and I've tried drying some. It works, but it's
Slow process.
a very slow process. We've frozen some individually and then put them in bags for winter.
And I have made preserves, but I'm not much on the preserve business. I've got too many made ahead already.
Yes, ma'am. When you preserve these, do you put them in water and put them in a deep freezer, or do you just put them in there?
I put them on a like a pizza pan, and separate them so they're not stuck together, and let them freeze. And then a day or two later, take them out, and they're individually frozen. And you can take and put them in a plastic bag, keep them in the freezer, and you can take out one or two later on. Let them thaw out when you want to.
That's a good tip to pass on. Never had talked about how to keep your figs where you can use them later. We've got some other clients that make some fig jam for me. And, of course, if you don't make it up, you lose your figs.
That's exactly right.
And you've got a way to preserve them. You know, this tree was cut here because it was in close proximity to this other one that was crowding it out. They left this nice oak and removed this other tree that was growing beside it, and rightly so, because it was competing against it. But the people took a lot of time and trouble to cut down in there with their chainsaw. And when I quizzed the people here why they did it, they said the fellow had always been taught to do that every time he cuts one because it makes it rot quicker. Well, believe it or not, there have been studies done on that. And it really doesn't make it rot that quicker. What it does do, it catches moisture. It's a mosquito problem sometimes during the year. A lot of bad stuff happens. But where you can make this really work for you is the natural rotting agent, the fungi that rots these stumps, is in our soil. So if you throw 2 shovels full of soil over the top of that stump will rot 3 to 5 times faster than it would be just left to sit out there in the sun. So you get that dirt on there and you start that rotting process, maybe wet it down once or twice and get it started. You can't stop it. It'll rot that stump right out. I'm talking here with Leland Blackshears here at the Rector Park. And Leland, tell me about your last project, this recent thing that went on here in the park.
Well, the most recent thing is this walking trail. We were one of 14 cities statewide to receive a no-match $35,000 grant, And of course, it's to improve the health of the general population, or local as well. And this was put in, if you can believe it, in June, landscaped along by Don Pickler, fellow commissioner, and sowed, fertilized, and of course watered. And we didn't want it to look like it had just been put in when we had our recent picnic out here, Labor Day picnic. And we're very proud of it. And there, of course, is the pavilion. That went in about 7 years ago, six years ago. And this park is used a lot. We encourage people to come out here, therefore we have to have plenty of shade and have it beautiful and comfortable for them. And that's where you come in.
Well, when Leland and them was working on this here, Leland was out here overseeing a little of it, or just checking on the people, and I got a chance to talk to Leland a little bit. They was very careful about not hurting tree roots. They went very shallow with this asphalt.
They did.
Put it on existing ground, and made a great walkway and without hurting anything.
We barely had a little root damage on 2 trees, just barely, and I thought that was exceptionally good.
You betcha, because what's the total feet of this? How long is it?
It's a quarter of a mile.
Quarter of a mile walk path. That's a pretty good walk path.
It is, and people walk it early in the mornings and mostly, and late in the afternoons.
There's a few people around that's not familiar much with Rector Park. They come through here, that it would pay them to stop in here and look. It's open year-round, isn't it?
We love having company. Just a few years ago, we were the only stop in the state of Arkansas for Nickelodeon. And Nickelodeon came here and filmed and had a good time, and children from this area, Piggott, Kennett, Paragould, and wherever, came so they could go through the Nickelodeon big mobile and see all the games and shows they had inside. And then Nickelodeon donated a metal bench and plaque to us and a light pole, and had it put on a kidney-shaped slab of concrete.
Oh, that is great.
But we were very complimented that they picked Rector to come, and of course they wouldn't have if we hadn't had the environment for it.
Oh, right. They're gorgeous trees and good people here, too. Sure is. You know, some trees have insect problems. Some just have construction damage. Well, we can handle them both generally at the same time. I'm using a soil injection here, building a mold of chemicals all around the root ball. It gets translocated into the crown of the tree. It has a very long residual. Stays working for a year or better, killing insects as well as growing new feeder roots and increasing the canopy of the tree. 9 different chemicals is going in this at once. So there's so much we can do that we used to couldn't do, and it's in most cases it's cheaper than it used to be. And just name me just any one thing that's come down in price. Well, taking care of your trees have come down in price. Give us a call. You'll be surprised. We're the Tree Doctor, Dickey Tree Service, in your yellow pages under trees.
Well, that's all the time we have for Tree Doctors today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you need to get in touch with Ed, you can go to dickeytree.com or call the phone number below. Remember, you can catch Tree Doctors here on KAIT every Saturday and Sunday morning at 6 o'clock. We'll see you next time on Tree Doctors.